What's up, everybody? So I was talking to a buddy of mine today about arrow construction, and I thought I should make a little video here real quick and let everybody know my thoughts and some misconceptions that I've seen a lot, and go over the process of how an arrow should be built according to what I've been taught and what I have found works best. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that the numbers written on an arrow shaft are the arrow weight, and that is not true at all. So it says 300-.003. That 300 is the spine, and the .003 is the straightness. Now, a lot of people think that 300 would be the weight, but it is the spine. And the spine of an arrow is when a stock length shaft, which is typically 32 inches, is suspended 28 inches apart, and there's 880 grams hung from the center of the shaft. Now, however much that shaft flexes with that weight is what the spine is. So this being a 300 spine, it would flex 300 thousandths of an inch with the 880 grams hung from the center when it's suspended 28 inches apart. The .003 is the straightness. Arrow companies have a laser that they run down the side of the shaft, and this particular one would be straight within 3 thousandths of an inch over that 32 inch length. Now, when you get into the construction of the arrow, the first thing that should be done is on the back side. And a lot of people do not think about this at all. But the nock end is just as important as the insert end. This is the end that connects to the string and lines the entire arrow up with the bow. So the first thing that should be done is putting the shaft on an arrow spinner and spinning it and checking for wobble on the back side. However much wobble there seems to be needs to be cut off of each shaft, and it will be different for every shaft in a dozen or half dozen, whatever amount group that you get. Each arrow should be different. So whether it's a half an inch, 3/4 of an inch, 1 inch, whatever, you cut that off of the back first, and then you square up the back end so that your nock sits in there perfectly square to the shaft. Then you put the nock in, and you cut the remaining distance off of the insert end. You square the insert end also. A lot of people will square the insert end, but they don't take into consideration the nock end. They're both equally important. Some places don't square either end, and that's not adequate at all. So after squaring the insert end, you then glue the insert in, screw your point in, or depending on what type of points you have, glue the point in, whatever it may be. Once that is done, you spine index the shaft. And what that means is, with pretty much most arrow companies, the shaft is made of a rolled carbon fiber material. So when they roll it, when it all connects together, there's a seam somewhere. Now that seam will be stiffer than any other point around the diameter of the shaft. So you need to find that stiff point. There's devices made for that. There's techniques where you can plug both ends with a cork and put it in water. The heavier side will be at the bottom. The way that I do it is using a device made to find this with an indicating tool. however you do it, whichever works, whatever you have, finding the stiffest part of the spine is important. I put marks, generally 2 marks, on each shaft where the stiffest part of the spine is. When I fletch my arrows, the cock vane is in line with that stiff part of the spine, so that every single arrow is fletched the same way and the stiffest part of the spine is in the same spot on every single arrow. If you take a dozen arrows and you don't do this, you may have 1, 2, 3 that do not group right with the rest. And that is because of the spine being in a different place on each shaft. They're not flexing the same coming out of the bow. They're not reacting the same. So by doing that spine index, it puts them all in the same spot, and it's very unlikely that you will have a stray flyer out of the batch. So then after you fletch them, whether you do 3, 4, 6 fletch, whatever it may be, as long as you have everything in the same spot, they should all fly pretty close to the same. I think that a lot of people tend to believe that if they have a stray arrow here and there, they can just rule that one off as a bad one, or if they're not shooting tight groups or whatever, oh, it's the bow. Or there's a lot of things that people need to take into consideration that seem to get overlooked a lot with bow tuning, with building arrows, with your form and your shot execution. If you're not doing things properly, it doesn't really matter what you have. Nothing's going to work the way that it should. You could take an arrow with a 6,000 straightness, and if you build it the right way, it might come out with a 2,000 or 3,000 straightness. If you take this 3,000 straightness arrow and do it this way, this might come out with a 1,000 straightness. A 1,000th arrow might come out with no wobble at all. It's how you build the stuff, how your stuff is tuned. That's what's going to give you the performance for the end result that you're ultimately looking for.